You good to go?
We are good to go.
All right. Happy 2021. Good to see everyone or hear you. For those who can't see me, it's Mike Solberg, Chief of Gilbert PD. So welcome, and we're good on a roll call. You got everybody? I am.
I do.
Okay. Moving right along then. Review of the minutes from November 2020 meeting. Any discussion, or if not, can we get a motion to approve those?
Motion, Joe Desmond.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Second, Robert Smith, Chief.
Thank you, Robert. All in favor of approving the November minutes, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
I guess I should ask for no's. Any no's? All right, moving on. Thank you very much. Next order of business is, I guess it was September, was when we voted in myself and Kent as the vice chair. But the rules state we need to have another election, the first meeting of the year. So I can't speak on behalf of Kent. I'll let him, but I'm more than willing to stay in the role, but I don't think I can nominate myself. So we will open up nominations for the chair position for 2021. Do we have any nominations?
We do have a nomination, Chief. I nominate Chief Solberg to continue on as board chairman.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second that. Joe Desmond.
Thank you. All in favor of approving myself, Chief Solberg, as the chair for 2021, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? All right, I think we are good. Now for the vice chair, I can do a nomination. I'll nominate current vice chair, Kent Volkmar, Pinal County attorney, to be the vice chair for 2021. Do we have a second?
Second, Chief.
Thank you. Was that you, Robert?
It was, yes.
Okay, thank you. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? All right, congratulations, Kent. That concludes our administrative business. So with that, we will move on to Director McGuffin for a report.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good morning. And once again, Chief Solberg, congratulations on your chairmanship. I'll begin this morning with mention of the annual report. In accordance with statute, the 2020 ATA annual report has been submitted to the governor's office, to the Secretary of State, and to leadership within the legislature. Each of the board members should have received a link sent out by Ann Armstrong in late December. And I think there's also it's also part of the packet that was sent for this meeting. So I always like to just acknowledge the work that goes into the annual report. We use a lot of the same material because it's all very important information, and it is the most important information that we push forward. But it still requires some revision and a lot of, this year in particular, to streamline that report a little bit. So the work of Amanda, who does all the formatting and graphics, and Anne, who does a lot of the writing, those two do a tremendous amount of work on the annual report. And I just wanted to acknowledge that, and I hope that you found it to be valuable as far as the information it provides. The next item, just kind of an update again on the ACIC data project. As previously reported at other meetings, there's been slow progress on the initiation of this project. And of course, it is to add the location data field to ACIC systems that DPS controls. I met with DPS leadership on November 23rd, kind of got all the right people from various divisions and bureaus within the room, reaffirmed the support for that project within DPS, And DPS discussed how they have other projects going with that vendor. The vendor has been the kind of the bottleneck in this situation. But we have not been able to, or have not asked them to prioritize this project over others that they have going within DPS right now, because those are probably more important than what this one is. But yesterday, I did receive word from DPS that CPI, who is the contracted vendor, has written the scope of work, which is the document that we have been waiting for. They are reviewing it internally at this point, and once they approve it, we expect to have it at DPS, so then DPS can approve it, and we'll also, ATA will get a look at that as well. But we expect that now within a couple weeks, and we have heard that before, but this is the first time that we've heard that they actually have the document complete. So we'll take them at their word, and hope by the time the next meeting rolls around, we should have an approval of the scope of work, and they will have initiated that project. And we'll also know what that timeline is going to be at that point. So there's no questions regarding that. Then I will move on to the next topic. The next topic is a request to the board to enter into an interagency service agreement with DPS to fund task force vehicles in 2 phases. So as a reminder, at the November meeting, we discussed partial ATA payroll expenses being moved from the ATA fund onto the general fund of DIFI. At that point, we projected a savings to the fund of approximately $393,000 in the fiscal year, which we had, kind of earmarked to send to DPS for vehicles. It looks like that number, at least mid-year now, that projection is going to come in a little bit lower than that based on some other expenses regarding like Art Meyer's retirement payout, things like that. So at this time, I think we're looking at about $340,000 to $350,000 at the end of the fiscal year, but it is kind of a moving target, so that could change. That's probably a conservative estimate on our part. But as of this date, a little more than halfway through the fiscal year, there is approximately $200,000 available that is sitting in that fund. So today, my request to the board is to approve ATA entering into an interagency service agreement with DPS to transfer that current savings now. The advantage to DPS is the ability to purchase some vehicles now as opposed to waiting for the full amount at the end of June. The effect of this action will likely place some vehicles on the road several months earlier than a total disbursement that would happen in June. So if the board approves entering into the ISA, then I will seek approval of Director Daniels. And then with that approval, then we should be able to fully transfer that funding over to DPS. The ISA has been drafted. I worked with DPS General Counsel to get that done. It's a very simple document. It's about 1.5 pages in length. The document identifies the amount of funding to be transferred, in this case $200,000, and defines how the money can be spent. So it's very restrictive, can only be spent for vehicles, vehicle equipment, and the buildup costs that DPS incurs to have those vehicles, the equipment installed, emergency equipment and such. This is the same method the board used to transfer the funding to DPS for the addition of the data fields for the ACIC project. So we have done this type of a transfer in the past. And also as a reminder, the ATA cannot grant this money because it would cause us to exceed our appropriation for grant funding. So really this is the only way that I know of in order to get DPS that money at any point in the fiscal year. So with that, I would certainly be available to answer any questions. And I'd like to kind of acknowledge my intent all along was to send this over at the end of the fiscal year, and Frank Ceballos came to me and said, hey, we could do half of this now and that might help DPS out. So I did go meet with DPS leadership, and they were excited to get half that money now. They thought that would be an advantage to them. And so I'll take any questions that anyone might have.
Thank you. Any discussion or questions? Sounds like a good move, and they're definitely in need of it. Anyone? All right. With that, then I will. Can I get a motion to approve the proposed interagency service agreement to transfer $200,000 now? I think that's good for the motion.
This is Kent Volkmer, so moved.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second, Robert
Second,
Smith.
Joe Dedman.
Thank you, Robert. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any
Jack
opposed?
Johnson, I'll abstain on that.
Thank you, Jack. Appreciate it. I got to remember to ask for that before. Thank you. Any against? All right. Thank you. That will pass. Back to you, Director.
All right, thank you. As my last item, I would like to just kind of share some information that that has been researched over the last week or so. So I'm going to show or Amanda's actually going to show just a couple slides. So Amanda, if you want to start presenting. So this has to do with the discussion of calendar year 2020 auto theft stats from selected jurisdictions within Arizona. Since the start of the COVID impacts, there's been stories of increases in crime across the United States. And one of those in particular that has been kind of predominant is vehicle theft around the country. So we began hearing a lot of accounts from back east and from our neighboring states about significant increases in other states in particular. And at the November meeting, I think I mentioned to the board that we had looked at Phoenix, who was reporting about halfway through their fiscal or through the calendar year at that point, and they were showing an increase of about 10%. And so, you know, Phoenix is the largest municipality, has the most stolen vehicles. So that was a little disturbing to see that trend, even though 10% was below what we had been hearing around with other places around the country. So as 2020 concluded, staff thought it would be interesting to check individually with select agencies to see, one, if that trend maybe continued in the second part of the year, and two, if that trend was statewide. So this was a situation where if we had a database, it would be very easy for us just to, you know, summarize that information for the board. But in the situation we find ourselves presently, we have to literally go out to individual agencies and ask them for their numbers. And some agencies are really good about that. They have it on their website or they have it readily available. Other agencies, it's a long process to get those, what we would think would be simple numbers, but they may not be depending on how the agency compiles them. So just want to kind of revisit a couple states, Amanda, for the second slide. Colorado, as I've mentioned before, actually has that database. So these are actual numbers from Colorado for 2020. They know what 2020 has meant to them, and it's a 32.5% increase statewide. Colorado is really in a bad way right now. They are number 2 in the nation for the rate of auto theft for 2019 numbers, just behind New Mexico. And what's disturbing about Colorado is Colorado has a lot of really good programs in place. They have a full-time task force. They have a part-time task force that they can direct resources to really at a moment's notice and pay them overtime to address problems that they see crop up. They have a database. They're just a pretty well squared away agency when it comes to their ATPA up there, and they're still showing this type of an increase. So that's not great for Colorado, obviously. And then Texas is the other one. I've been hearing the director out of Texas talk about what was going on, and Texas is in the same situation we are, in that they don't have good data, they don't have timely information, but they are showing for 2020 in selected cities, they are showing increases anywhere from 10 to 40%. with particular emphasis on Houston. Houston showing is one of those with the large double-digit increases. So those are both bad news, and it's not certainly not just the southwestern states. We're hearing through IACP every once in a while about selected cities on the East Coast even that are showing increases in auto theft. So if you could show the next slide, Amanda. So what staff did was we went out and we looked at different agencies around Arizona. And so I'll kind of work through this slide a little bit. Two of the most important agencies are actually represented on this slide. Even there's about 11 cities or municipalities that are included here because there's a combination in Pima County that are included. But the two really most important, and they're most important because they're the largest cities and they have the highest volume of auto theft, which is Phoenix, which is the first one, and then Tucson. Both of those are represented here. Not all of these graphs on here represent a full calendar year. Some, like for example, the city of Phoenix only is reporting through October, but when we measured them, we did take into account if they only went through October in 2020, then we only went through October in 2019. So what you're seeing here are like periods of times in those two different years. We think that it's a pretty good sample size because there's about 10,000 auto thefts reported here, which would be, a little bit more than half of what we would expect. Last year, as a reminder, we were at 18,151. So having over 10,000 auto thefts here gives us a pretty good sample size to at least project against. And what we see here is really, it would be difficult to project a trend. We're really not seeing a trend here. Phoenix is up 3.9%, but that's better than they were halfway through the year when they were at 10%. So the second half of the year, those later months in the year have certainly been kinder to Phoenix than the early months maybe of the pandemic, if in fact this is even pandemic related. But that seems to be kind of the consensus around the country because that is the one thing that has changed. Some East Valley cities have had some double-digit increases. Tempe at 13.4, Chandler at 18%. And while those sound bad, the volume of stolens is not the same as it is in Tucson or Phoenix. So they have a significant increase. And you might think, well, it's an East Valley thing, but then if you looked over at Gilbert, Gilbert's down 2.4%. Where probably our biggest surprise on this graph is actually Tucson. Tucson is 16.8% lower. So that's really significant, and about 400 stolens, just under 400 stolens less in Tucson, and that is calendar year statistics. So we don't expect that to change really at all. As a West Side representative in Glendale, they're down 8.3%, and then the Pima County number. Pima County is not only the sheriff's office represented, but it's also Oro Valley, Sarita, and Marana PD. All of those are Spillman agencies, so they were able to grab those numbers and compile them for me. So they're down slightly, just at 0.5%. And then we wanted to look out west. Bullhead City, fairly active in Mojave County, but they're down 28.6%. Again, a fairly low volume when you consider it statewide, but it's good news. We wanted to look up north as well in Flagstaff, and Flagstaff was one of those agencies that just could not get the stats to us in time. So we still don't know what Flagstaff is necessarily looking at. So Amanda, if you want to go to the final slide. So based on what we're seeing, we don't see a trend. And this is really really good news, I think, as far as how we compare to others around the country and then what Arizona might be able to expect. Again, the data is not complete. We'll see what it comes out in in 9 months or so when DPS publishes the Crime in Arizona report, or we get the FBI numbers, which are all kind of related to those reports. But so for 2019, these periods would be 10,610 stolens. 2020 is 10,496. It's down just a little, slightly over 1%. I know that's not going to hold. Maybe it gets better, maybe it gets a little worse, but I do have confidence that it's going to remain relatively static, or possibly even a slight decrease for 2020. So we think that's good news, and we will just hope for the best as those numbers continue to roll in. So, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, that concludes my report, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you for that report. I know we're focused on auto thefts, but a lot of times for us, vehicle burglaries go hand in hand. If they find the keys, they'll take the car. And just looking at our numbers for vehicle burglaries in Gilbert, we had 32% less vehicle burglaries in 2020, which is surprising but good. So good trend both for vehicle burgs and auto theft. Hopefully it keeps going down. Anybody else have any questions or comments? All right, Director, anything else? We good?
Well, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, in regard to vehicle burglaries, we obviously understand the nexus to vehicle theft and so Amanda O'Halloran spends a decent amount of time on social media talking about removing those valuables out of sight to try and dissuade potential thieves from looking in a vehicle, because oftentimes I think the anecdotal stories tell us that they break into a vehicle and they find keys, and so what started out maybe as a burglary ends up as an auto theft. So we are trying to get that message out as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, a financial report from Frank Sabalas.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Thank you for this opportunity to present the financial affairs for the Auto Theft Authority. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen real quick with all of you. Please let me know that you do see a PowerPoint slide at this time.
Yes, we see it.
Perfect. So at the end of December 2020, the Auto Theft Authority's fund balance was $6,968,797. Year-to-date revenue income, for our first assessment, we brought in $3,423,000 and $14,992 in investment income, bringing our total at $3,438,677. We are currently in our second assessment phase, and we are using the new system called opt-ins to receive our payments and the information for our assessment. The system is going very well for us. I actually received a phone call just before the board meeting with an insurance company, and I asked the question, how do they like using opt-ins? And their response was they love it because they don't have to go through multiple functions in their own company to get the payment submitted. So it's a lot easier for them. Even though there's a cost to using opt-ins, they're enjoying it. We also did put a measure in place for companies that had zero assessments. They don't have to go through opt-ins to submit it, keeping them from having to endure a course. So we worked with the insurance companies, but they're really enjoying this new process that we put in place. Our appropriation, this is going to be our administration and our public awareness appropriation. We have spent so far $212,813. We have $459,000 remaining. And as Director McGuffin stated, we outlined in the spending plan how we're going to spend that money. And about 200 of that right off the bat is going to be going to DPS to help purchase vehicles. But I'll talk a little bit about the spending plan. Grants. This is all of our grants from the task force to the vertical prosecution. We have spent $2,290,000, and we have remaining $2,367,000. Now, that does not account for the grants that the third quarter payment that was just made this last 2 weeks. So that number is going to be a lot less when we talk in the next board meeting. We also still have $1,432 in our Sims fund balance. Are there any questions about what I've spoken about so far? Okay. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to go ahead and move over to the spending plan, which I believe I will need a motion to accept the spending plan.
Do we need to discuss it before we have a motion?
Yes, sir. So
Okay.
there's been changes to the spending plan, and it's going to be from January through June, lines 10 through 12. As you can see, we have adjusted our administrative costs for salaries straight from January through June. January and June are going to be a little higher for multiple reasons. Like Director McGuffin stated, we are still anticipating a payout for Mr. Meyer, who retired. And I reduced our administrative public awareness funds. Since we're not doing outreach and our funds for payroll have reduced in that category, we reduced it down to $1,500 for the remainder of the FY21. This will also help us cover the Watch Your Car program mailouts. The next line item that is new is the $200,000 going to DPS for the vehicles. If you go to June, you'll see a larger number. That's because we're going to have 3 pay periods in that month. Plus, I'm anticipating moving expenses. At some point, we will move out of 1110 West Washington, and there might be some moving expenses that need to be paid for. There's also an additional $140,000 going to DPS for more vehicles. Mr. Chairman, with that being said, I would ask if there's any question about the spending plan. If there aren't any questions, that concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Can I get a motion to approve the revised spending plan?
Motion to approve the revised spending plan.
Thank you, Robert.
Second.
Can I get a second? Thank you,
Second,
Sheriff.
Joe Dedman.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Frank, anything else on the financial end?
No, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Ann, a public awareness update?
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members. We conducted 2 grant contract compliance reviews this quarter. One was for La Paz County and the other was Pinal County. And I'm happy to report that both of those agencies received a fully compliant, perfect score on all of the 4 categories that we reviewed. So I want to thank the staff of both Pinal and La Paz counties for getting all their information to us and in very timely manner so we could review these. So we plan on 2 additional compliance reviews next quarter, and that will conclude our 6 vertical prosecution counties for the year. So, and we'll set up our timeline for fiscal year 22 as we go forward. So I'll report on that at a later time. We had, as we've been talking about, our COVID has definitely impacted our public awareness efforts this year. Although we were able to virtually, Amanda attended a block watch meeting, and Jamie was a panelist at a virtual webinar for the Arizona Independent Assurance Agents and Brokers of Arizona group. So there's still some virtual training and webinars that are happening where we can continue to try to get our message out, and Amanda, through her social media efforts, can aid in that too. So we'll keep pressing on and trying to adapt and still try to, offer some kind of support for the public. As part of the DIFI Public Information Office Division, we released 3 press releases since our last board meeting in November. 2 of those were insurance fraud cases that originated out of DIFI's insurance fraud group, and the third one was introduction of the 2 new deputy directors, John Savory and Shane Foster. And so We received quite a bit of response. The insurance fraud, definitely there was a lot of interest in those two cases that department conducted. And I believe, unless there are any questions, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Ann. Any further discussion? All right. Thank you, Ann. Moving on to Law Enforcement Subcommittee report. I have no updates for this subcommittee. So next is Robert Smith on the Public Awareness Subcommittee report.
Thank you, Chairperson Colbert. Much like the public awareness and grant program situation, there is nothing really to report here because of COVID. Thank you.
Thank you. And is this correct? Legislative Subcommittee? Is that Robert still? I thought it was Kent.
It's me.
Okay. Go ahead, Robert. Sorry.
Oh, it's okay, Chairperson Solberg. Here, so the 2021 session just began and it is underway. We're in a unique situation with security currently. So for the short term, probably through the month, we're not going to have any access, even if we wanted access, for security reasons. Moving forward, however, I would like to reiterate what I stated last time, in that I'm open to liaise with any members of the board, as well as travelers and Mr. Wright, former Chairperson Reed, and State Farm, as well as this new construct that we have with DIFI. So I'm open to hear from Director Daniels, Assistant Director Savory, as well as any other interested parties for any general or specific topics to vet and liaise with the session underway. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Vertical Prosecution and Subcommittee and Auto Theft Prosecutors report. Do we have a representative from County Attorney's Office, from Maricopa County Attorney's Office?
Yes, Leslie Laments on behalf of Maricopa County.
Thank you, Leslie. Good.
Just briefly, for the last quarter of 2020, the Maricopa County Attorney's Office had 603 auto theft submittals that were processed for review and charging. We entered into 175 auto theft related plea agreements, and our two designated auto theft prosecutors pled out in the last quarter of 2020 10 different auto theft, either task force direct cases or related cases. One of which was State v. Chauncey Marcus. That was prosecuted by DCA Jessica Sorensen. And he pled to trafficking in identity and attempted fraud scheme. He received 5 years in the Department of Corrections and got a 3-year supervised probation tail. And that's all to report, excuse me, from our office for this quarter.
Thank you, Leslie. And who else do we have?
We have Nick Hartman from Pinal County.
All right. Good morning, Chairman, Board. Just a brief update from Pinal County, a couple cases that were highlighted. State versus Roy Rushing. That was a jury trial in the beginning of December. The defendant is well known in Pinal County, has 10 priors, has 3 open cases, and I was able to secure a conviction by jury trial. Sentencing is pending because there are, the second trial was completed armed robbery, aggravated assault. Another DCA was able to secure a conviction on that trial as well. The third trial is scheduled at the end of February, and that's a possession of drugs for sale case along with other counts. And after that, then sentencing will proceed. But just on my case, the defendant's looking at 7.5 years to 25 years. We're looking for consecutive sentences on all 3 cases, and hopefully we'll be able to argue that sentencing but I will be second chairing the third case, the drug case. So I'm sure Mr. Roy Rushing will be happy to see my face in court again. Second case is State versus James Austin. That was resolved by plea agreement. The defendant had 2 counts of theft of means of transportation. He stole an ATV and a trailer, so I charged 2 counts of theft of means of transportation. He had 2 priors. He was on parole. He accepted a plea for 10 years in the Department of Corrections. His priors were pretty recent. He was well known to be armed and dangerous, as well as fleeing from police. So the 10 years in DOC was appropriate. The third case is State versus Wagner, a task force case, Christopher Wagner. The task force did a great investigation with Christopher Wagner, along with his co-defendant Tabitha Looper. The detectives saw a stolen vehicle, did surveillance on the stolen vehicle, found drugs as well as a firearm in the vehicle, did a search warrant on the house. The house was evident to be a drug house and a house that's been there for a while. There's surveillance cameras, lots of meth throughout the house. So he, with his 5 priors, he accepted a plea of 10 years in Department of Corrections with a Class 2 felony drugs for sale tail. That case is pending sentencing, but with the stipulations 10 years DOC, I'm hoping for a 5-year probation tail to adequately monitor him upon his release. And then the last case, I was happy to secure a restitution just on 1 case of $27,960. That's State versus Aaron Reddy. And in that case, the defendant actually fled in a stolen vehicle, crashed into another vehicle on the road, kind of ramming it into a guardrail. So I was able to secure restitution for the stolen vehicle as well as the victim's injuries. But that case was already sentenced, and I believe he received 8 years in the Department of Corrections for that case. And that's the report for Pinal County. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Nick. We also have Matt Ashton from Pima County.
Hello. So in Pima County, we haven't yet gotten back to having trials yet, and I'm hearing that we won't for the rest of February. But we did have a Mr. Joseph Page get sentenced this past month, I believe just a week ago. And he was a guy who, he had 8 priors, a lot of them for forging checks from burglaries that he had taken some kind of victim information and then managed to forge a check out of that. Well, he tried to do that in this case, and that's how it started, was with a home burglary where he upgraded from checks to credit cards, I guess. But then when he went to use those, they didn't work. So he decided he still had the victim's purse, he still had the victim's keys. So he broke into her house again, went into her garage, and broke the club that she had put on the car. He shaved off bits of wood on the steering wheel so that he could actually remove the club, and then he was found by our task force driving that vehicle around, also armed and, of course, not supposed to be. Unfortunately, he got a very fortunate draw in his case on which judge he was in front of, so he had probably our most lenient sentencer. Currently, he's now going to be serving 7.5 years.
We have Mojave County. We've got Lisa Samstag on the phone, I believe.
Yes. Hi, Ann. I don't have anything specific to report, and unfortunately, our vertical prosecutor was in another meeting, so I apologize.
All right. Thank you. Let's see. Anyone from La Paz, Yvette or Tori?
I'm on the line, Tori Bryant from La Paz County, and I don't have anything to report.
All right. I believe that's it, Chief.
Thank you very much. Captain Entner, the DPS Task Force update.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Just a couple of personnel issues. Personnel issues. we were lucky we got Sergeant Todd Burson back from Tucson PD. He was recalled back due to some staffing issues in the supervisory area. He came back on December 19th, and he was ready, well, sort of ready to go. But the problem is that good for him and bad for us is that in the next 6 months, he's going to stay and fill out his last 6 months. He is scheduled to retire from law enforcement on June 21st. So we'll able to utilize his services. And then Sergeant Bob Bowers is going to be retiring on March 31st. So he has less than 2.5 months scheduled with us. And we are tentatively looking at doing a small department ceremony for him on Wednesday, March 17th. Bob Bowers is going to have over 35.5 years in law enforcement, and he's been with the task force since about September of 2012. Task force activities. Our activity has been kind of down last several months due to a number of different things. Holidays is one thing, and pandemic is the other. But since our last meeting on November 20th, we recovered 231 stolen vehicles, which is down from the previous period of 256, with an estimated value of 3.39 million. Our arrests were also down. We had 44 arrests, which was down from 55 from the previous. We served 6 search warrants, recovered 6 weapons during this time. Just kind of also for year to date, some of the other significant activities, we recovered over 44 pounds of marijuana, 17.5 pounds of methamphetamine, half a pound of heroin, and more than 114,000 in cash that we seized. One of the things that we're starting to see a trend, noticing it, is no longer really the straight up stolen vehicles. It's where you go in there with a screwdriver, punch and turn, force rotate the ignition, and we're looking at stolen vehicles that are much newer, that are dealing with fraud, people using identity theft, forgery, and fraudulent schemes to get these vehicles from car dealerships or from other parties. And it seems like, well, the manufacturers have done a great job in updating their security features, which makes it harder to steal. But as you saw, we're still having our vehicles stolen here in the state of Arizona as well as nationwide. And some of it also has to do with the fact that people are leaving their vehicles running unattended, thinking that they're having to key fob is a great security measure. I want to talk about 3 significant events. December 3rd, Detective Chad Johnson located a stolen vehicle. It was a 2004 Mitsubishi Mirage at a hotel in North Phoenix. As he called for additional detectives to assist with the surveillance, the vehicle went mobile. He lost it in Glendale just due to the erratic driving. He was in the air about 54th Avenue in Sweetwater. There's a park nearby, a Glendale City Park. He saw a Glendale unmarked police officer driving in the area. The Glendale officer was actually responding to an aggravated assault call involving a vehicle that matched that same description. Unbeknownst to both of them, it was the same vehicle, and it is alleged that the suspect in the stolen vehicle was trying to enter into the Glendale City Park. Another vehicle, they almost collided coming into the park at the same time. When the other party approached the suspect basically pointed a sawed-off shotgun at the victim, and then immediately left the area. Phoenix Firebird actually found the vehicle southbound on I-17 at a high rate of speed, going over 100 miles an hour, just due to the circumstances involving the theft, the recent incident of the aggravated assault with the shotgun. DPS SWAT was called in. Phoenix Firebird followed the vehicle as we tried to converge in. They abandoned the vehicle around 35th Avenue, McDowell, and tried to walk away. And we were able to take the suspect and the female passenger into custody. And we ended up booking the suspect, the driver, on theft of means, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, possession of dangerous drugs, endangerment, and custodial interference. The female passenger turned out to be a 16-year-old runaway who had multiple engagements with DCS. We turned the female over into DCS, into their custody. The second one I'll talk about is on December 22nd. The Phoenix detectives located a stolen Audi, which was purchased with fraudulent documents. Doing that surveillance, the suspect and his friend would go into car dealerships, and this one particular was a BMW dealership, and they were presenting a forged or fraudulent cashier's check with about $10,000 to $12,000 as their down payment. Salespeople seeing that this is a cashier's check, saying that, hey, this is a quick buy, this should be pretty easy, didn't really scrutinize the documents like they should, and then ended up releasing the vehicles over to their suspects. When we identified the suspect, it was the same suspect we arrested a week and a half prior on the same MO. We ended up just conducting a simple traffic stop on him, took him into custody, and we recovered 2 computers, probably about 200 sheets of blank check stocks, 3 fraudulent checks, printers, cell phones, and that is still ongoing, and Landley is the detective for that particular case. The last one I want to talk about is rather recent. On January 6th, the Tucson detectives located a stolen vehicle on a property in South Tucson through LoJack. It was one of 6 vehicles that were listed as stolen out of North Las Vegas on a fraudulent purchase. The suspect, purchased 6 vehicles, and the fraudulent means they had a LoJack which they activated, and we tracked it to a dealership in South Tucson. The detectives wrote a search warrant. They recovered 3 out of those 6 vehicles from North Las Vegas and located 2 additional stolen vehicles. One was out of San Diego and another one was out of Tucson. The suspect and his business partner are also being investigated by Tucson PD Financial Crimes and the state AG's office for similar crimes at a different location. We ended up locating multiple documents on the property, and then we basically took custody of 25 vehicles and 3 recreational vehicles to determine true ownership. Other than that, we had a good holidays. I hope everybody else had good holidays. And do you have any questions for the task force?
Captain, on the retirements, are we working on getting replacements for those? I know that's always hard to get right away.
I have a process, and Mr. McGuffin is going to be sitting on the. I haven't sent Mr. McGuffin the formal announcement, but we spoke last week. We are going to do a process on the 2nd of February to identify a replacement for Sergeant Bowers. We haven't done that with Tucson with the replacement for Sergeant Burson yet. His is still about 6 months out yet. But hopefully by this time next meeting, we can identify that sergeant from DPS who's replacing Sergeant Bowers.
Very good. Thank you. Anyone have any questions? All right. Thank you, Captain.
Thank you.
Next, call the public. Are there any members of the public that wish to have any comments? All righty. Any reports on current events matters? Is that you, Ann?
That's for anyone that may have something
Okay.
they want staff to look into for a future meeting.
All right, hearing none. I think that brings our meeting to a close. Our next meeting is March, is that correct? Yeah, March 19th at 10 a.m. I would love to say it's in person, but I'm sure it won't be. But this is working out well for, I think, everybody. So thank you, Ann. We will see you all in March.
Stay safe, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.